What is going on, beautiful people? I hope you are having a fantastic day. Welcome back to another episode of the Thrive Forever Fit Show. As always, I'm grateful for you. I'm pumped that you're here. And the fact that you spend your time listening to me rant and rave is unbelievably amazing to me. And I couldn't be more grateful for it. Secondarily, this podcast is sponsored by a brand new product that I have just released to the market. It's called Elite Collagen. If you're not taking a collagen product, then you just don't care about your healthy skin, your healthy hair, your healthy nails, your joints, your cardiovascular health, just your overall body wellness. Collagen is an amazing product that is going to help with everything. And listen, I mean, you're exposed to a lot of elements. Why not internally fortify your system with a beautiful collagen? But here's the situation. Some of you guys are no, hey, bud, I'm already taking a collagen. Appreciate you. Got you. I got bad news. The problem is this. Most collagen powders are just that. They're powdered collagens, and they're made from bovine, which is cows, or porcine, which is pigs' skin. Have you ever seen a cow's skin or a pig's skin? Some of them are plant derived. We won't even get into those. The collagen, it's not even really a collagen product. It's a makeup of stuff that tries to become collagen. But if you're taking a collagen powder, one of those big hefty collagen, gross, chalky, whatever it is, just know that it's coming from skin of cows and pigs. And of course they wash them. But if you've ever been at a pig farm or a cow farm, not the most savory of things. My collagen is a marine-based collagen. And here's the big thing. Forget all the other shit I've already said. Here's the differentiation between mine and the one you're already taking. Mine is half a tablespoon every day. It's a delicious chocolate mint flavor. And here's the big stuff. Here's the real deal. Here's what nobody's telling you. The powdered collagens get broken down inside of the gastrointestinal stomach, inside of the stomach. That's not where collagen gets absorbed. Collagen actually gets absorbed and has a higher efficacious benefit if it's absorbed in the small intestine. Well, see, mine passes through the stomach based on a beautiful collection of polymers and a collection of these peptides. If you heard that, that's just Rudy taking a sneeze. He likes to be introduced in some of these podcasts, and I didn't give him a proper shout out. But my collagen actually passes through the stomach and gets digested inside of the small intestine, which is where all the magic happens. Your powdered product's not even making it there. So you're getting very minimal, if any, efficacious effects from drinking that chalky, gross tasting powder product. So if you're interested, just go to thriveforeverfit.com, go to my store. You'll see Elite Collagen on there. You can pop me a note. I'll give you all the details. It is unbelievably amazing. I've been taking it for a while because I've been testing it and creating it and everything. Guys, it is revolutionary and it is unbelievable. I can't wait for you to try it. Elite Collagen. Go grab yourself some today. Take care of your skin. Kathleen, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you.
Oh, I'm really excited to be here after listening to some of your interviews and hearing about your story. I think that we have a somewhat similar story and you seem to have a good philosophy that jives with my philosophy. So this is going to be a great conversation.
It is going to be so much fun. And you are in Toronto, Canada. We just kind of touched on that before.
Yes.
If I'm driving Uber and I say, hey, Kathleen, what do you do? Like, what would you tell me?
I try to bring health and wellness to the people that I interact with. You know, exercise changed my life. And I see so many people interacting with the discourse of health and wellness in a way that sort of makes them smaller. Like, as I don't mean physically smaller, but I mean like, you know, I see people when they talk about health, they kind of bend over and they almost go into themselves, and it becomes very shaming, and it becomes about sort of what they can't do and all the things that and all their failures. And I want people to walk into the room and sort of throw their hands up and be like, I love to walk, or I love to run, or I love to play hockey, or, you know, like I eat broccoli, or like whatever it is. Health and wellness for me has the possibility to be engaging and exciting and empowering and expansive. And that doesn't mean it's not hard work. And it doesn't mean I don't wake up some days and think like, oh my God, I don't want to do my workout. But it means that when I used to think about exercise and eating well when I was a kid, for the first half of my life, I thought of it as something that was done to me. It was like things I should do. It was really felt overwhelming. It felt scary. It felt demoralizing. It felt like the world was saying, like, you're a bad person because you don't exercise enough, and you're a bad person because you're overweight, and you're a bad person because of, you know, all these hundreds of things. And now the world wasn't actually saying that to me, but I felt it, right? And now
was this as a kid? Was this when you were little?
Yeah, so sort of, I would say, for the first half of my life. So my parents were divorced, and I sort of ate my way through my feelings with food. And, you know, I couldn't find, I'm tall, I'm 6 feet. And when I was younger, I felt like really embarrassed by my height. And I felt, you know, that sort of hunched over posture I was talking about a couple of minutes ago. That's sort of how I felt. I would walk into rooms and I wanted to evaporate. Like, I didn't want to be there. And the difference is, I think, is when you get stronger and you feel better about yourself, you walk into a room and, you know, I'm not saying I don't have some days where I have imposter syndrome and all that stuff, but primarily I walk into the room pretty proud to be in the body that I am. And that's what I do for a living. I try to make people proud to stand in the body that they are in, right? Because listen, we get one precious life, right? And you know, we can only be the people that we are. So I think instead of trying to be somebody else and trying to shit all over ourselves, and, you know, like, I think it's just great to be able to be like, yeah, I'm imperfect and I'm human and I make mistakes. In fact, I made like 50 of them already today. But, you know, that doesn't mean I'm a bad person, and I can be, you know, imperfectly perfect.
I love that. It's a phenomenal answer. Before we jump into like health and fitness and stuff, I want to talk about you. So, because I love that. So you're 6 feet. Were you always taller than and I'm asking this for a specific reason, were you always taller than your friends and the people that of your age?
Yeah. Oh, so my mom was a single mom, and she's an actress. And so we moved around a lot. And so that was part of it, is that I would get to a new school and I was always taller. And up until a certain point, I was taller than all the boys. You know, it felt to me that I sort of got matured much faster, and then they sort of caught up to me eventually. My partner now is like 6'4", so it's great. I feel short. I love it. But yeah, and I would show up at a new school and people would think I was a supply teacher, and like, it was not fun, you know, and I felt very awkward. And, you know, again, the things that I admire about myself now were not things that I admired about myself then. So my mom was an actress, a classical actress. So I would show up and like, I could quote Shakespeare and, you know, philosophy and all this stuff, which is maybe wonderful when you're 40, but definitely when you're 12, kids just want to talk about the Simpsons, or they want to
it's super cool now, but back then you were like,
so I was not cool. I was a nerd. I hate as I said, I wanted to sort of evaporate. But then I had this really cool experience, which is the sort of philosophy behind my first book, Finding Your Fit, which is, eventually my mom said to me, Mom, your mom's amazing. And she said to me, you know, so far in your life, we have tried to make you fit the mold of every other child. You know, like, we've put you in ballet, we've tried to put you in softball, like, we've done all these things. And she's like, but that's maybe trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. And if all we care about is that we move, and that you move, why don't we try to find a way that fits who you are, or at least who you are at this moment? And when I was a teenager, I felt much more comfortable with people my mother's age, because I'd grown up in the theater, right? Like, you know, from the age of 5, the age of 3, I think, when my dad left, like, I'd go to the theater with my mom. That was babysitting. So I'd be backstage with, like, you know, 20 other adults, and I'd be chatting, talking about Shakespeare and like all that stuff. So my mom said, let's get you a membership to the YMCA, where the demographic is sort of like under 5 and over 40, and you can just go walk on the treadmill. And that's really like the basis of so much of my philosophy with my clients. And my first book, Finding Your Fit, is about like, how do you find the fit that works for you? That moving has to be thought of as a non-negotiable, but how you move, you know, is up to you in the stage of your life and all that stuff. So I'm forever thankful to my mom.
Totally.
And, you know, now, as I said, I walk into a room, I like being tall, I like talking about Shakespeare, but I also like talking about, you know, other television. Like, I've sort of diversified who I am a little bit, and I'm better able to get around along with people my own age. And
I can totally I can totally relate to that. Like, when I was little, I always tell people that I stopped growing when I was like in the 8th grade. Like, I was like always twice the size of my friends. Like, whenever I showed my significant other a picture of me from like the 1st grade, I look like Elf from the movie Elf, Will Ferrell.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I love that movie. I love Christmas. I love that.
We're all sitting out in front of the, you know, on the steps of the school, and my knees are by my ears because I'm so much taller and so much, I look like,
Yes.
we're in the first grade and I look like I should be like in the fifth grade.
Totally. That was me as well.
And it was so, looking back on it, it was like, what was going on? It's like, and I remember like being kind of like you, like I wanted to like shrink in a lot of those circumstances because I did feel odd or off. Yes. or you name it. So I can totally relate to everything that you kind of just unpacked there. And, maybe that's the reason we're both kind of doing the things that we're doing today, is because I want people, I'm just like you, like I want people to feel amazing in their vehicle, right? In their body and
in their
whatever,
vehicle. I love that.
Whatever they bring, with them, like that's not who they are. It's just the outward, impression of, what the world gets to see. And I want people to feel comfortable in that. So let's talk a little bit more about now with your first book. Did you write that based on the knowing that other people needed to hear a story like you lived, or what was the premise behind like the creation of that first book? Because I have massive respect for anybody who's willing to say, I'm going to write a book, because if you've ever written a book, it's like, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do.
No, that's a really good question. I don't know how much of a good answer I have, other than so much I find of my life is just surprising a little bit. So I started writing for the Globe and Mail, which is a national newspaper in Canada. And so I wrote for them, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years, I guess. And so I was writing for the Huffington Post, and I was writing for doing other things. And then I think enough people just sort of said, like, all of this is great, but these one-off articles are not as helpful as it could be if it was all together.
Okay.
And I remember for one Christmas, I hired like a student to print out all my articles and put it in like a spiral notebook to give to my mom as like a Christmas present.
Yeah.
And I remember her opening and thinking like, oh, this is so cool. Like all of them are together. Now these were just like printouts of articles.
Right.
And then I think that sort of spurred me to think, well, what about if I tried to find a way to sort of knit them together with my personal story and my philosophy. So I think that sort of came with that. And then I put together a book proposal. And I think it was also just, I had so many people come to me and say like, oh, you've always been motivated. I'm never going to get fit because you've always been motivated and I've never been motivated. And I was like, well, no, but actually I haven't always been motivated, but I haven't always been fit. And I think I had enough of those conversations with people to realize that, listen, we are all our own worst enemies, or most of us are our own worst enemies, at least in some ways. And one of the ways exactly. And I think for one of the ways we get in our own way with health and wellness is thinking, well, those fitness experts, they have it easy. They've always been motivated. They've always been fit. And, I can never do it because that's just not who I am.
Right.
And so I just think that is such, BS. Like, it's just not true. I understand why people think that, because it's scary to take the first step. Right. And I think it is easy to play that comparison game of like, well, that person has always been that, like, that's just who they are. But so I wanted to be able to say to people like, no, here's the book, read this through and see, like, I've fought with all the same things that you fought with in my own iterations. Like wasn't exactly the same, but it was, the concepts are there. And if I could do it, so can you. Like, we can all be the hero of our own health journey. We just need a little bit of help, a little bit of guidance, a little bit of motivation. So I think those are all the reasons why I wrote the book. Cool. And I love being able to give it to people. And I love being able to say, like, I'm a big believer. We were talking before the break. I love Aristotle and his philosophy of this idea of you become the virtue you want. So he says, like, his quote is, you become the builder by building things. You become the harpist by playing the harp. And I think it's the same thing with fitness. Like, if you want to be healthier and live a healthier life, you have to start living the healthier life. Like, you become fit by doing the things. Yeah. And I think we get so caught up in, well, I'm not that person. Then instead of saying like, well, if I want to become that person, I just have to do it. I need to do those things enough times. I don't know, James Clear has this thing. So I love the book Atomic Habits. And he has this thing where he says, every choice you make is a vote for the future person you want to be. So it's the same idea, right? If you want to become a builder, you build things. If you want to, like, you vote to become a fitter person by going for a walk, by drinking some water. So that's a very, very long answer to your question, but I think I wanted to give people the tools to become the builder, to become the healthy person. Yeah. And one of the tools is knowing that, like, anybody can do it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm big on like identity, right? Like how you identify. And I think a lot of times, like, we identify as someone who doesn't work out, right? Or somebody somebody who things are hard for, or,
Mhm.
I don't work out because it's, it's too hard for me and whatever. And so
Mhm.
when you're making that kind of identification, it will be challenging for you, right? So you've
Absolutely.
kind of like to, to the atomic habits thing, it's like you're casting a future vote for who it is that you
Exactly.
maybe want and or need to be in order to
Yeah.
get the things that you want. Back to like kind of the Stoics and Aristotle and all of those, I love all that as well. And I was listening to something and they said, it was talking about like being sad, and
Mhm.
they and the person was talking about how, you know you don't necessarily need to remove the sadness, because without sadness
Yes.
you wouldn't understand what happiness was, and without happiness
Yes.
you wouldn't understand what sadness was. Are you willing
Yes.
to? And so the question was, are you willing to give up both forever, right? Are you
Yeah.
willing to never be happy again, to never experience sadness? Well, and the answer would be, well, of course not. I don't want to.
Of course not.
I
Yeah.
don't want
You
to
got to
not
be able to
be.
feel it all.
Yeah, I don't want to not be happy, but I think a lot of times we have that all or nothing mentality when it comes to fitness, is
Yes.
that it's always going to be this challenging, or
Yes.
for you, it's never challenging. And both of those things couldn't be further from the truth.
Oh my God. Absolutely. Yeah. No, because I think I'm like, I love that point, in that it is a mixture of both, because it's not that it's easy for me now. It's just that I have habits that are set up, like it is
Yeah.
a lifestyle. But more than that, it's that I have the self-talk ready to go. So when
Totally.
I wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh, I don't want to work out, I'm able to say to myself, no, Kathleen, you always feel better after workout. The only workout
Yeah.
you ever, regret is the one you didn't do.
Totally.
And yes, you might be tired now, but of course you're tired now. You were just sleeping. Like, your body is still in a sleepy
Yeah.
state. But if you go work out, you will feel better. You will be more energized. You will be more awake. So I
Yeah.
think so much of it is that having the self-talk. But the problem is that the self-talk comes from like years of doing the thing. So you kind of have to say to yourself, okay, I need to do the exercise enough in order
Yeah.
to know that it's going to be like, it's going to make me feel better. And that's part of
Right.
the problem is, like, my 15-year-old self, who'd never gone to the gym, I wasn't able to say, Kathleen, you will feel better. I could only say, well, my doctor says I will feel better, or they,
Yeah.
the mystical, they say I will feel better. So you kind of have to have a little bit of a leap of faith at the beginning and sort of say, okay, I'm going to give it a month, or I'm going to give
Yeah.
it 2 weeks, or I'm going to give it 6 months, or whatever it is. I'm going to put the reps in. And so that I can get some good data. Like, I really am such a believer in all days are just data, like all experiences are
Yeah.
data. So if a client says like, oh my God, I overate last night, I'm like, okay, so how do you feel right now? And they're like, oh, I
Right.
feel full, I feel gross. I'm like, great. Okay. So you overate, you feel gross, you feel full. So put that in your data bank. So the next
Yeah.
time you want to overeat, you say, well, actually, like, I'm going to, like, this is not going to make me happy. It's going to make me feel gross.
Yeah.
But it's that cycle, right? So the more you do things that serve you, the more you have data to know that those choices make you feel good. And then, the problem is you just have to do a couple of the things in the beginning that are the good data. So, and that really does take that discipline and faith, and sort of say like, okay, I'm going to commit to this.
I agree with you
sort of
1,000%. And I kind of do the same thing. So I have these, I call them walk and talks. And so I walk a lot, just both great for me, and it's really therapeutic for my brain. It's when I get like
so good for the brain.
I get my greatest ideas, and I'm making notes and write this down, make a note. And so, I did one not too long ago, and I was just honest. I was like, hey guys, I want you to understand that, like, I was sitting at my desk and it was time to go on my afternoon walk, and I didn't want to go, but I'm obviously here, right? And I want to tell you why. I'm going to tell you why I'm here. I'm here because I have trained myself to do the things I don't want to do, even when I don't want to do them, right? And that's only through reps. And so it's like you said, rep 1 will be way different than rep 10,000. And once you get to 10,000 reps of anything, then you've now reprogrammed yourself to do things on those days. And so my solution for somebody who's like, yeah, Jay, but I'm on rep 4. So sometimes you've got to believe in my belief in you, because you don't yet have that belief in yourself. And I got such a beautiful gift yesterday. One of my clients was talking, and she said that her mother had broken her femur a year ago and was just now starting to walk again. And she started walking again because of my little walk and talk videos.
Oh, I
was like,
that.
And so that's another reason to just keep doing things, because I had no clue. I had no idea that some lady who lives in somewhere that I'll never be, probably never meet, is actually doing something because I'm willing to be honest about my struggle and a journey of just to go for a walk. And so I think you and I both have a responsibility to keep doing those things and saying those things and being those things. Because and for anybody listening, like, know that we have those same crappy days, right?
Oh my God, absolutely. Yeah. So that is what my therapist would call the ripple effect.
Okay.
That idea of like you putting out something into the world and then it's like somebody hearing it. And I love, so one of the things that is I've been doing for the last 20 or more years is doing therapy. In fact, I have therapy this afternoon. I love my therapist. And so what she would suggest to everybody, because she suggested this to me and it really worked, is keeping a mood journal for a couple weeks. It could be for a month, it could be 2 weeks. She got me to do it for 2 weeks. And basically what she said, because when I first started with her, I was battling fairly severe depression. And so she said, okay, so every day you're going to wake up and you're going to put the number you are on a scale of 1 to 10. So normally it'd be like a 0 or a 1 or a 2. And then she's like, and then you're going to go for a walk. And then after the walk, you're going to put the number that you are out of 10. And then she's like, and she gave me different things to do. And the reason why she wanted me to do that is that sort of that leap of faith. It makes me do it because she asked me to do it because I was, being accountable to her. But it's like, yeah, you might not know at this moment that this is like in your heart, it might feel hard to do, but if you do it, you get the data to show you. And now when I don't want to do a workout or go to work or any of the things that she got me to chart for those 2 weeks, I actually have a concrete journal that I can look at and I can say, I am literally always in a better mood, even if it's just by like 0.1 after I do things. So I would encourage people to do that because that's how you get the data. And now I don't need to keep the journal. This was like 15 years ago, but I still have that journal. And every time I work out, I make a mental note of like, okay, yet another example of how I feel better when I do the thing that I said I was going to do. So she really encouraged that. And then she really encourages this idea of a ripple effect in that when you're feeling low, or when I'm feeling low, sometimes it's easy for me to tunnel into being like, oh, I haven't done enough today. I haven't accomplished enough, or like nobody cares, or like all this stuff. And I'm a big meditator and I have a lot of tools, but one of the tools I just think of is, okay, so maybe today is not the best day for you, but if you go out and go for a walk, maybe you smile at somebody and that creates a ripple effect on their day. Right? So it's like, what can you do when you feel low that kind of takes you out of yourself? And for her and for me, just thinking about how you can positively impact the world. It feels really good especially if you do feel sort of disconnected from a lot of things, which you can feel if you feel sort of anxious or depressed. It is very easy to tunnel into yourself in those moments. So anyway, that's the ripple effect. She would love it. She would be like so happy that you experienced that.
And that's kind of how I think about it. I think about it as like, in terms of like, whenever you're feeling helpless, the best thing you could do is get helpful. And I think when we think about
very stoic, control the controllables.
When we think about getting helpful, I think oftentimes we think of something monumental. But it's like you said, it's like, it's a smile, right? It's how you doing? It's any of those little things. And tell your therapist, I think this is amazing. So what we've done is, so I have like my private coaching group or people that come to my studio. I created a 1-sheet journal, and part of that journal down in the bottom corner is when it's an AM and a PM mood check-in. So the first thing they do when they get up in the morning is they check, how do I feel? Like, how do I feel right now? I love the numbering system because that kind of gives it's so much easier. But mine's kind of set up as like, hey, let's check in right now. Like, when you wake up, how do you feel? And then when you go to bed at night, how do you feel? And then the entire sheet is kind of constructed in, the foods you ate, the movement you did, the water you drank, the sleep you got, and all of those things combined, like, did it change your mood from the time you got up to the time you went to bed? So, I mean, very, very similar and very awesome. Similar. And so I think things like that are so beneficial. Let me ask you this in respects to that, because you're like now you don't really need to get your sheet out and put I'm a 1.5 versus. So I have the same theory on I'm mindset over macros, right? Like, I think mindset's way more important than macros. Yes, I think macros are important, but I always tell people and clients in general, or people that just ask for nutritional advice, is the last thing I want you to have to do is to count your macros for the rest of your life. First of all, nobody's gonna do that, right? Like, I spent a lot of time in like the competitive bodybuilding and competitive fitness worlds, and that's the last thing those people even want to do. They just have to do it because it's part of their job. And I've created a lifestyle for myself, right? Where now I no longer need to track my macros. Like, and so that, do you feel the same way about food as you do about that? Or what's your philosophy on that?
Oh my God. I feel like, can we have 400 hours to chat? So I think the thing, yes. So I think the thing with food is, you've said a couple times throughout this conversation already that we go from sort of 0 to 100. Like, we think we need to be, if we're going to do something important for the world, it has to be monumentous versus like just a smile. And I think that's very similar with food, is we often get in our own way by thinking, well, the only way to be healthy is if I count all my macros, I eat zero sugar. And listen, if you are a bodybuilder, or if you're somebody, a competitive athlete, or, yes, maybe you do have to go down that rabbit hole. So I'm not saying that for everybody on earth, that's not needed. The amount of effort you need to put into your nutrition is going to be determined by the goal that you are trying to reach. But for most people, if that is not their job, that you don't need to get into the weeds. So one of the things is, I think people really do, is they try to optimize the margins before they have a base of anything. So so instead of before you start worrying about macros, are you drinking enough water? Are you eating 5 servings of vegetables a day? How much processed foods do you have? How much, how much fiber are you having? Are you eating at 11 o'clock at night? Like, I have so many clients who eat well until about 10 o'clock at night. And then at, 10:30, they eat a container of ice cream. Okay. So don't worry about your macros, cut out the container of ice cream, right? So for most people listening, what they need to do is dial in the basics, right? You need to, stop when you're full, eat when you're hungry, drink your water, eat your vegetables, get your fiber. And then once you've figured out all of that, then you can figure out if you want to take the next step. And really, like, it depends on your goal. And there are going to be some people that are going to need to do that. But for the most part, you don't. And again, like, I love James Clear, and one of his lines that he always talks about is standardize before you optimize. And I think that goes for fitness, it goes for nutrition, it goes for everything. It's like, don't try to get into the weeds until you standardize doing the right things consistently for, a couple months.
I always, is this the kind of the same thing? I always say that, like, you can't optimize a habit until the habit has become the standard.
Well, until it's a habit. Exactly. It's the exact same thing. You got to standardize, and then,
and most of us want to go to maximum optimization before we even create the ritual or the standard around doing the thing long enough, right? And I think also we need to get better as humans, is maybe pushing our time horizon out a little bit, and understanding that, like, talking decades instead of days, right? Like,
oh my God, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and it's just, like, I think partly why we do it, to be honest, is that when we make ourselves think that the goal is perfection, like, oh, I have to do macros, it actually is a way to just not do it, right? Like, for most people, if you say, well, the thing I have to do to get healthy is exercise for 2 hours a day and count all my macros, you know what the person's going to do? Screw it. So it is sort of a little bit, for not everybody, I'm definitely not saying everybody, and I'm not even saying it's a conscious thing, but I think unconsciously, like, we get so caught up in this perfectionist mindset. It's scary. It's too much. We analysis paralysis, we get caught, and then we just don't do anything. And again, really, to quote you to you, is like, we get caught in having to do everything versus just finding that middle ground of, like, okay, well, can I drink some water? Can I go for a walk? Right? Like, it's the same idea. You don't have to do good in the world. You can do a smile. You don't have to go and, go to a month for Habitat for Humanity. Now, you can do that for sure as well, but don't put off what you can do today for tomorrow because you want to be perfect. And that's really the truth. I think really truth with nutrition. It's the truth with everything. It's about consistency, and it's about daily habits, and it's about, like what you said, is I love that, pushing off the timeline. I try to encourage my clients to have an infinite mindset versus a finite, right? So I think it's James Cars, he wrote the book Infinite versus Finite Games. And basically it's a mindset shift, right? Like, if you're in a finite game, that's the, like, quick diet of 10 days. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to be perfect for 10 days. I'm going to lose this weight. I'm going to, for my wedding or for whatever. You get there, you check off the box, it's done. And then you go back to your old habits. But health is a privilege that we get until the day we die,
Ah,
so, it's an infinite game. We're here. It's the long haul.
I agree. I'd be kind of to stack up on what you're saying. I think oftentimes that we add complexity instead of consistency,
Yes,
right?
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I'm laughing only because so my partner, his name is James, and I'm a woman of many, many words. So we'll be having a conversation. I'll be like going on for like 40 minutes, blah, 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 blah. Like I will have read a book. I go on and on and on. And then I'll pause, take a breath, and he will sum up what I say beautifully in like one sentence. He's a lawyer. So he's like, I feel like that's what you're doing, which I love. It's like I go, like I talk, and then you're like, okay, and what about this? It's very, anyway, it's great.
Well,
Yes, I agree.
my real name is James as well, so maybe it's a James thing. So we'll
Okay.
who knows?
We'll go with that.
We'll chalk it up to that.
Yeah.
But I think everything you're saying is spot on. And so there's a couple of things that I read kind of in your bio and in your notes, and we share a lot of these. And you're talking about the importance of mindset, eliminating or controlling negative self-talk. I think that's one of the biggest things that I see people kind of getting in their own way by being extremely hard on themselves. So what are your strategies or your tactics or tips for how you would approach a client who was, having that negative self-talk and that was keeping them from being on track?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, awareness is really key. Like a lot of people have negative self-talk and they don't even know it. So I might actually just get them to journal. I mean, it sort of depends on the person for sure, but for a lot of people, I might just get them to journal, write down some of their thoughts, and then just sort of highlight. We often have things that we come back to. And everyone's thing is a little bit different. And sort of if that thought comes over and over again, like highlighting that's really interesting. Or another one, there's a book called Reboot. His name is Jerry Colonna, I think he wrote it. He's a coach. Anyway, what he gets people to do is when they journal, take a pen, and anytime they're like negative crow, he calls it the crow, comes out, then you highlight or you write those words in a different color of pen so you can see the difference between like positive and negative sort of self-talk. But any way that you can find a way to even know that you're saying it, because there's so often that we have this shaming voice to ourselves, and we're without even knowing it. And you think that, well, if I'm speaking to myself like harshly, that's going to motivate me. So I think that after I have people recognize that they even have negative self-talk, then I would have the discussion with them of this idea that, positive self-talk is not, yeah, everything you do is perfect. Let's just forget about it. And so like, I think people, again, to go with this dichotomy, people think, well, it's either I'm saying to myself, like, you better work out, you're like a lazy asshole, or it's like, oh, who cares, whatever you want to do. And so I try to explain to people that I'm not trying to let them off the hook. The answer is not like, oh, well, nothing matters. What I'm just saying is that unproductive, like negative, cruel self-talk is not motivating. In fact, it just inspires more behavior that you're not proud of. Like it creates this idea where you shame yourself and you feel unmotivated and you feel like that identity of like, well, I'm just a person who's, a failure. So why not continue to make choices that don't serve me? So I have this group coaching course and we call it Kick Your Ass with Compassion. And I think that that's what I would try to help people understand, is that the self-talk that I am promoting is not the let yourself off the hook, and it's not the cruel. It's the productive middle ground where you kick your own ass, as in like you are making yourself accountable, but you do so with compassion. So when you have a bad day, you say, okay, so this is interesting. So what was upstream of that, like that choice that didn't serve you? Did you not get enough sleep? Were you triggered by some family stuff? Did you not have enough food? So you were kind of hangry. Did you not have enough protein? So everything becomes data. It's that growth mindset, that Carol Dweck growth mindset. And you're compassionate with yourself, almost like you would be with a child, right? So if your child came home and they had a really bad math exam, you wouldn't say like, you're a stupid, lazy asshole, and you're never going to get a better grade in math. But you also wouldn't say like, oh, well, who cares? Like, just go eat bonbons. What you would say is like, okay, are you being bullied? Are you not getting enough sleep? Do you need a tutor? So I would help them find that middle ground. I think that the sort of the theme of today's middle ground, right, is like, and that's what I would do with the self-talk.
Yeah, I think it's pattern recognition, right? It's like whenever you start to like, you can see patterns or get people to see their patterns. Because I mean,
Mm,
as humans, we're just a series of patterns or, habits and
yeah,
rituals and standards. And so I think a
yes,
lot of times, like back to what you were saying about people aren't even aware that they're doing it. It's
yeah,
because the pattern has become so normalized in their own brain with their
absolutely.
own language. I'm really big on like language. Like when I hear somebody talk, I'm horrible at like the correction of that language, not in a really bad way, but I'm like, okay, well, hold on a minute. Like you're using language that doesn't fit the
Yes,
scenario for which we were talking. Like I was talking to a client today and she kept using the word suffering over and over and
yeah,
over again. And I was like, we have to stop using that word.
yeah,
And she was like,
yeah,
why? I was
yeah.
like, because in the scope of what it is we're talking about, that is not suffering. And if you
Yeah.
continue to use that language around this particular situation,
Mhm.
then you're defining suffering in a way that is not going to
Not
serve,
true.
right?
It's not going to serve you. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And
And that's that
so, yeah.
first idea of helping even the person realize that they are using language and self-talk that doesn't serve them, right? Most people, I really don't think that people know that. And I think that they
No.
think that if they're mean enough to themselves,
All right.
that they will therefore succeed when it's just absolutely not true. Do you know the Tim Ferriss podcast?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so anybody listening, if they like this topic, I really suggest Tim Ferriss and Brené Brown did a podcast, and I think it's called Finding the Balance Between, I don't know, like self-talk and acceptance or something, but it's
Yeah.
all literally on this topic, and they discuss for like 2 hours, how do you find the middle ground between letting yourself off the hook and berating yourself in a way that is unhelpful. And those two
Right.
people, like two of the smartest people I've ever listened to.
Yeah.
It's an amazing, it's maybe from 2 years ago, but if you just look up Tim Ferriss, Brené Brown, and it's the most recent conversation, it's brilliant.
One of my this is kind of in that same topic. One of my least favorite, I'll call it like phrases, is
Mm,
when I hear people say, I'm going to listen to my body. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Let me unpack that for a second. I'm going to listen to my body because I think most of us, our bodies have been lying to us for like 20, 30, 40 years. And so maybe that's not the right guy to be listening to. He's giving you kind of some bad advice. But I think a lot of us use that as a way to get off the hook. It's like,
yeah.
well, today I'm just going to listen to my body and blah, blah, blah. And so I think, and before, my suggestion is always before you start listening, I want to get your opinion on this is why I'm asking.
Mm-hmm.
Before you start listening to your body, you've got to make sure you and your body are actually speaking the same language, or we're communicating with the same end goal in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's your thoughts around that?
I really, really love that. Yeah, I mean, it's tricky, right? Because if you've been eating sugar all your life for the last 20 years, what your body is going to say is, give me more sugar, give me more
Right.
sugar,
That's my
right? So
point. Yeah.
yeah, no, and I got your point. I think I think, I think it really depends on where you bias as a human being as well. So I think there's some people who are so disconnected from their body that idea of listen to your body, it's a useful concept because it's like, okay, so dial in and let's just have a discussion. And that doesn't mean believe everything your body says, but
Right.
at least have a dialogue. So I do think that can be a really
Yeah.
interesting, but in that dialogue, part of the dialogue might actually be like, oh, okay, so you're trying to get me to do something that you want, but it's not actually what I need. And that's a big thing. Like, what does your body want versus need? Like often what you want is to sit on the sofa and watch Netflix, but what you need is to go for a walk. So I think that if you're somebody who is completely disconnected from their body and never even engages in that discussion, then that could be a really interesting tagline. But then I think there's some people that get so lost in listening, and as you said, the discussion is not overly helpful. So really, what they need to do is actually just go out and experience their body.
Yeah.
So I think it can be. I think so much of health is actually like, it's like Socrates, like, know thyself, right? So you kind of have to know where you bias with all these different things,
Yeah.
and then be able to say, okay, so where do I bias, and now what is my goal, and how do I modulate, manipulate, like where I normally bias, and move that so I'm making actions that serve me towards my goal.
Yeah.
But now the tricky part of that is you have to make sure that your goal is actually your goal, because it's so easy to be the goal that you make is something that is like determined by your favorite celebrity or your father or your mother or what you think you should be doing, right? So it's a lot of reflection that this takes
Yeah.
place, right? Like, because reflecting on, what is a goal that actually is realistic for me and my age and my gender and my life realities and my financial realities, right? So making the goal an actual truthful, realistic goal, and then making sure that you are actually being truthful for yourself. It's challenge.
Yeah.
And I think that part of the issue is that then you can listen to a podcast like this and be like, oh my God, it's so challenging. It's so much. I don't want to do it wrong. And then that can be analysis paralysis. So then you just like, then you're like, well, I'm just going to stay on the sofa. So I guess what I would say to everybody listening is, while you're thinking about all of these ideas and while you're trying to know yourself and figure out if you're talking the right language with your body and like all of these things, just go for a walk. Like, don't overthink it. Like, you don't have to have it all sorted out. Like you and I've been doing this for about 20 years, and I don't know how long you have, but like, let me tell you, I started this journey not having it all figured out. I just started going, as we talked about at the beginning, going for a Y and walking on the treadmill for 10 minutes. So don't let yourself think that you have to have all the self-talk and everything all figured out to just make the next right choice, right? Like if you're listening to this podcast, while you listen, like stand up and do some marches, do a standing plank, do some squats, go for a walk. Like it doesn't, you do not have to be great to start, but you do have to start to get great. And that's a really big main takeaway, right? Like I am so much healthier than I was when I started this process, but I wouldn't be where I am now if I hadn't taken that first step.
And there's no perfect path. Like I started when I was 11 years old. I started lifting weights and I've done everything. I always tell people like, if there's a workout out there, I mean, I'm started when I was 11, I'll be 48 in a couple of days. And I've done it, guys. And there's no perfect formula. There's no, people always ask me like, Jay, what's the best workout? And I'm like, there's no such thing. The one that you'll actually do. Like
the one that you will actually do. Absolutely.
The one you're willing to do right now. And guess what? It may change tomorrow and it may change the next day and it may change the next day. I've gotten really into, just to put a bow on that, like listen to your body thing. Me personally, I've gotten really into recently, like having conversations with myself, which sounds a little bit crazy, but
I do that all the time. That's what therapy teaches you to do.
And I've trained myself that like, just because I have a thought or a belief or an emotion that I'm not responsible to act on all of those things. And just because I believe something doesn't mean it's true.
Oh my God. Thoughts are not facts. Absolutely. Thoughts are not acts.
And I'm saying like, just because Jay, believe something doesn't necessarily mean it's true. And so what I've been doing is kind of like unpacking a lot of my beliefs, having conversations around them. And it's not that I have to get to a new belief, but it's just opening and expanding my idea. And I only say that so that anybody listening who says, well, I believe I am listening to my body, and I believe my body is saying all of these things. And I'm not doubting any of that. But what I would suggest is maybe unpack that a little bit and say, well, why do I believe these things? And why is my body telling me to do X, Y, and Z? And then when you start to unpack that, then it's going to give you the data that you've been talking about. And then you can really make really massive, powerful decisions once you have an accumulation of data and facts about yourself, right? And to touch on something else you said, it's a lot of I'm big on definitions, and I'm big on you defining your definitions. Like fitness for me, if we both right now got a piece of paper and I said, okay, Kathleen, you write down a definition of fitness and I'm going to do the same thing, we would probably we'd have a couple of words that were the same, and it'd be different. And then if we gave that same piece of paper, a blank piece of paper, to 100 people and said, write down what fitness means to you, they would all be different. And that's cool and okay. And you got to be okay with that your creation of your life and your journey, you get to be, the driver of that. And so, you touched on like, oftentimes we think a certain way and it's not even our thought. It's like somebody else told us to do this. And so absolutely. It's like, once you can start unpacking that a little bit and asking yourself a bunch of questions, I think it's really valuable to your long-term success, and will also go back and help you with the negative self-talk and all of those other things in your mindset and like all the beautiful things we've kind of been talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I really, I can't underline what you just said, that thoughts are not facts. Like, I always say to all my clients, like every emotion is okay, but every action is not. And that's where you get into this idea, like you can feel anything, you can think anything, like all of those things, like, yeah, let them run through your head, like that's fine. But then pause and say, okay, like, where did I get this thought? And is this thought coming from the fact that I'm just haven't had enough sleep, or I'm really hungry, or like, think about how you feel about things is so dictated by your physiological state, right? And so that's the other thing I'm really trying to get better at in my current version of Kathleen, is like, when I feel something, stepping back and thinking, okay, what physiological state am I in right now? Because if I've just done a workout, then I feel super powerful. If I've just been sleeping, I feel a little bit tired, you know, and if I've had like a 14-hour day, then I feel sort of like cognitively overloaded. And I often will like, oh my God, I can't do that on the weekend. I'm way too tired. But really, if I just go to bed tomorrow, I will feel differently. So this is where it comes into of like, thoughts are not facts. Just because you feel something, it does not make it true. And the thing I found unbelievably powerful is to realize that this is not a problem in Kathleen. This is a part of being human. And it's not a quote unquote problem. It is something that successful people are really good at doing. So I think for the longest time when I was growing up, I sort of thought that, you know, the fact that I had to analyze my thoughts, and the fact that I had to go to therapy, and the fact that like my moods dictated my thoughts, like all of this stuff was like a problem with me, and I realized the older I get, it is the wonderfulness of being human. And it takes off that pressure of like, oh, I should have better thoughts, or I should be perfect. And it's like, stop shitting all over yourself. Like, you know?
Yeah, I think we kind of touched on it earlier. It's like, you know, it's the dichotomy of happy versus sad, right? It's like, I'm not willing to give up either of those, because they're both required to have, you know, I want to be happy, right? Like that's my ultimate goal. But if I was never sad, and I was never, you know,
you couldn't understand what happy was.
I wouldn't be able to conceptualize even what it meant. And so
absolutely,
I think a lot of
times, feel it all.
Yeah, a lot of times we want to get rid of negative emotions or negative thoughts and just have them go away forever. I think it's the embrace of them and understanding that just because I'm feeling this in the moment, like you said, that was well orchestrated the way you laid that out, is you ask yourself those questions. You're like, okay, Kathleen, what's going on? Am I just tired? Am I hungry? Did I just get up? Did I just work out? Like if you put it through that filter, then 9 chances out of 10, you might even come back and be like, you know what? I'm not sad. I'm just thinking, I'm just tired.
I'm just tired. Exactly. I just need to go to sleep.
Just need to go to sleep. Or and guess what? Just because I feel that way in the moment there, you said something and I kind of chuckled, because I think a lot of us do this. It's like Tuesday and we're like, I am too tired to do anything this weekend. I'm like, it's Tuesday. Like
exactly. How do you just calm down?
Yeah, we got several days to go through. Like, let's maybe make that decision on Friday, right? Like Tuesday's too aggressive to make that decision, but we all do that, right?
Yeah. So James and I have this thing where he knows me very well. And like, so I do have a problem of not problem's not the right word, but I do know myself. And I know that I get this like anticipatory exhaustion about future things. So what he has learned to do with me is he will say, okay, Kathleen, I'm just going to give you an option. Do not make the decision now. Just let it sit in your brain, let it percolate. And maybe in 24 hours, why don't you tell me what you think about doing this X, Y, and Z this weekend or in 6 months or whatever. And so it's so brilliant, because if I had to make the decision right then, I'd be like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm too tired. I'm too this. But he's just like percolate. And then, you know what? I go to bed. I have a good night's sleep. I have a nice meal. I do a workout. And I'm like, oh, you know what? Totally, I can do that. And then I say, yes. Yeah. But it's so true with even just with food, right? Like we get caught up and it's like, oh my God, I need that cookie. And it's like, okay, take a pause, right? Like I love the Viktor Frankl quote that I'm going to paraphrase, but it's basically like, between stimulus and response is our biggest power, right? So we get stimulated, we want the sugar, we want the cookie. And then it's like, pause. And before you respond, then that's where your power is. And if in that moment you can say, okay, well, I only want this sugar because, I didn't sleep last night and I'm exhausted, or I only want the sugar because I didn't have any healthy fat and protein at lunch. So why don't I go have some healthy protein and some fat, or like whatever it is. I want the sugar because I'm angry at my boss, or I'm sad about my partner, or whatever. So I think that pausing and questioning your thoughts and questioning why, like what physiological state is dictating that thought, is so powerful in every situation. When you want to skip a workout, when you want to have food that you know is not going to serve you, when you want to yell at your partner, in my case, when you want to say no to every single social situation out there, that's definitely my thing. I'm like, no, I'm too tired, can't go to dinner. And it's like, well, actually dinner would be really fun and you love your friends and you want to go do that.
Yeah, it's like, it's the impulse control too, right? It's that, like, being able to delay that gratification, like you were saying, like the decision between like the desire to have it and then the actual action of actually doing it. If you can learn that impulse control in there, and that's where a lot of successful people, that's where they make their metaphorical money, right? That's where you make your metaphorical money, or even with working out, right? It's the, I do or I don't want to go to the gym, or I do or I don't want to go for the walk, versus the do or the don't, right? It's the controlling of the impulses in that stage that really signifies whether you're going to be successful or whether you're not going to be successful.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm just going to underscore what I said before, because I'm not sure if I was exactly coherent enough. What I was trying to say earlier when I was saying that I used to think that I was the only person who had those impulses. And what I've learned as I've gotten older is that we all have them, and like having them doesn't make you a bad or a good person. It's how you manage them. And I think that's a better way of putting what I was saying before. And one of the things that's really helped me is reading people who I'm very respectful of, and like the Tim Ferriss podcast, for example, he has people on that are, the greats of all of their professions, like of investment bankers and of authors and of athletes. And every single one of them says, these are the impulses. These are the bad things that come up in my brain. These are the times I've wanted to quit. And this is how I reason with myself. And none of them say, I always want to work out, or I always want to eat well, or and the more people that I really respect that I listen to that say those kind of things, the more I'm like, right, the impulse is not something to be ashamed of. The impulse is human. Yeah. It's how you manage the impulse, right? And people listening, I really hope they get that. Like the next time they have a craving or they want to skip a workout, instead of thinking like, oh, well, I'm obviously destined to not work out because I desire to skip this workout. Think, oh no, me and every other person on earth have wanted to skip their workout. And guess what? Lots of people still do the workout, and I can do the workout too. Yeah. Just because I think it doesn't mean I have to act on the thought.
And just because I think this is important too, I'm going to see if you agree with me here. Yeah. Just because you haven't managed those situations well in the past doesn't mean you can't manage them well now. And I'll use myself as an example. I used to, I've told this story before, like when I was a little kid, like I kind of ate my feelings and stuff. And so I would go and I'd ask my mom, I'm like, hey, can I have a cookie? Like I'd say, can I have a cookie? Because if I say, hey, mom, can I have 10 cookies? She's going to say no. So I would say, can I have a cookie? And she would say, well, of course. But when I did that, I would shove 2 cookies in my mouth, 2 in my pocket, and then I would have the one cookie in my hand, right? Or, I would deprive myself for so long that I would go to the grocery store and I would get an entire pie or cake or whatever it was, and I would eat it until I made myself sick, right? And so I've retrained myself to delay that gratification, knowing that I can have that stuff anytime I want it, right? Because discipline equals freedom, and I'm disciplined enough to have the freedom to eat what I want, when I want, in the capacity that I want. And so I think a lot of times people think, well, I've got this uncontrollable impulse. You can retrain yourself to delay that gratification. And I promise you, the more reps you put in with the delay, the easier it gets. I was telling a story to one of my clients today, and like nothing gives me greater satisfaction, because I'm a little bit of like I'm a competitor at everything, is to go to a birthday party and be the only one not eating cake. And people be like, oh, Jay, you can have a piece. I mean, you're in great shape. And I'd be like, no, I'm good. I'm perfect. Right. Like, and I've trained myself to do that because, first of all, I don't really love store-bought cake. Right. So it's easy for me to say no. But when I push that gratification off, like it really just fortifies like all of the things that I've kind of set up to be successful.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the stories I could give about my childhood and food are very, very similar. Sneaking food.
That's what I read. I saw that. You said you were, an overeater. You snuck food. Did you do this? Because did you have any brothers or sisters?
No, single kid, single mom.
So for me, I had a brother who was 6 years older, and my father got killed when I was 5 years old. So I grew up with a single mom as well. But I would watch my brother, who was 6 years older, eat like 2 hamburgers. Well, he's 6 years older than me. I would eat two hamburgers, and I would be like, or I'd watch him like do something, and I'd be like, well, I'm going to eat that. Like, so I was always overeating, and I was always like sneaking food, like you said, junk food, and I'd ask for one and eat four. And so you knowing that you kind of did the same thing, how did you just grow out of that, or do you think you kind of trained yourself out of that?
I mean, I think both. I think change is hugely possible. I think that's the biggest thing to take from all of this, but it just takes time. I think it's a little bit of an identity shift in general. Like once you become the person who exercises and eats well, then that's just, you make choices that fit with your identity. I think it was a gradual process. I think I started with the exercise before I changed the food. And then I slowly, as I got more fit, then I'm like, oh, well, I don't want to eat that food because I want to be able to have the energy to like go for the workout. I think everyone's a little bit different. Some people maybe start with the food and then it goes to the exercise. But for me, I definitely started to get more fit. And then I was like, oh, I want to fuel myself better. I think it's habit change. I think for a big thing, it's about what you said when the person said, well, you can have a piece of cake. And the idea of like, yeah, I could, but I don't want to. I think that's a very different thing. Like when I was a kid, I think there's an element of also being a child. And it's like, well, a parent can tell me I can never have this again. So I need to eat as much of it as I can now. And now it's like, I'm an adult. So like I could have 10 cookies, but you know what? I could also just have one. But I could also have 0 because guess what? I could have 10 tomorrow if I want to. So there's a little bit of also just saying to yourself, like, this is not something being done to me. Like I get to choose and it's an agency thing. So I think that's part of it. And I think it's partly what you said of like, well, why would I have store-bought birthday cake? Like what I really try to instill in my clients is my idea of the love it rule. So like I for sure eat foods that are maybe not A+ ideal for me, but I do it because I love it. But I'm not going to have, Doritos that I don't love. And I wouldn't have store-bought birthday cake either. I would have I love chocolate peanut butter ice cream. So we have Kawartha dairy ice cream in Ontario, which is like from up north. So I might have a small bowl of that, or I love fudgicles. Like I love chocolate, but like I wouldn't have crap I don't love. So I don't know, it's all of it, but it's mainly just slow changes. Like I didn't go from one day eating, all the food to the next day eating none. Partly it was therapy, partly it's being able to talk to myself, partly it's having an identity shift. And partly it's just learning to listen. And in this way, it is learning to listen to your body when you overeat and you feel disgusting, learning to say, oh, interesting, this is data. Like, I don't feel good when I eat this way. So then the next time you want to eat that way, then you can think back and listen to your body. So I think that's maybe the final note I'll say about the listen to your body thing is part of it is figuring out which body and when you're listening to. Because when you have a desire or a craving, in the immediate sense, your body might want the sugar. But if you take a moment to listen to past iterations of your body, what you'll realize is the sugar actually makes you feel like crap. So that is sort of part of it as well, is you have to be smart enough to sort of say like, oh, well, last time I ate an entire tub of ice cream, I wanted to vomit. So my body was saying to me, don't eat the tub of ice cream, even though in this moment my body is saying to me, if you want the ice cream, you want the ice cream. So it's a little bit of a funny thing. Like that's why it's interesting and complicated and wonderful. And you just have to be kind to yourself and use it all as data, all learning experiences. And it's a growth, like it's a gradual growth process.
Yeah. But I think that comes back to what you said earlier about like, there's no finish line, right? Like
there's no finish line.
We're in this for, forever. Right. And so I think that's the important thing to remember is I get this question a lot, and you probably do too. And I'd like to get your answer on it. People always say, well, Jay, how long is it going to take me to blank? Right. And I usually come back with, well, why does that matter? Right. Because if you really want it, right. Like if you came to me and you said, hey Jay, I want to make $10 million. And I say, okay, cool. And you'd be like, well, how long is it take me to make that? And I'd say, well, is that really the goal? Right. Is that really something you care about? And if you said, well, yeah, then the answer would be, well, it doesn't matter how long it's going to take. Like, is it, if you're willing to go after it and do it, then it's the action is more important than the actual goal.
Yeah, process. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really interesting question, because I do think that there's something about our brains that like to have a finish line, even if the finish line can then change. So I think, like, I would equate it to running a marathon. If somebody said to me, you know, just start running, and I said, well, how long do I run for? And they said, well, I don't know, just keep running. That would be very, very disconcerting. Whereas if they said, like, okay, well, the marathon is X amount of time, or you have to run 5K. So it's not that I agree with you that if something's important to you, it doesn't matter how long it takes. But I also think there's an element that we like to have those short-term check-ins. So I think right. Like, and so I know that you weren't saying that that wasn't a good thing, but I do think that is the key, is finding the balance between knowing that ultimately health is an infinite game, ultimately, right? But within that infinite game, you can have finite games along the way. So I think how I would put it is this: if you only care about the finite games, right? Like, you only care about the, well, I will lose 10 pounds and then I will be happy. That's not going to work, because that doesn't, right? You lose the 10 pounds, and then if you stop the game of health, you just gain the 10 pounds back. So I would say that finite, discrete goals without an infinite game plan do not work. But an infinite game plan, as in I'm going to be healthy until the day I die, with shorter finite games within it, is completely wonderful. That's, I think, how I would put it.
Yeah, I think it's a situation where I see people, it's like, if it's going to take that long, then it won't be worth it. Right. And so if that's the case, then is it even worth it to even start it? Right. So I've got a theory and a philosophy that if I can't do it forever, then I'm not even going to start it today. And that's kind of that's a big scope that you can put a lot of little things in. But if you said to me, hey, Jay, I want to lose 100 pounds. And I said, perfect. That's going to take you 3 years. And you don't want it to take 3 years. You want to get it. You want to, so you would say, well, if I can't do it in a year, then I'm just not going to do it. I think a lot of people fall into that category because they think, well, I'm going to have to do this forever then. And that seems very daunting.
Yeah.
But I do agree with what you're saying.
Yeah. And I think I think ultimately so much of this is, it depends on the person who's in front of you. And I think when you work one-on-one with somebody, you can sort of see, okay, what motivates you versus what and everyone is motivated in a slightly different way. And then sometimes people will come and you kind of know that they're looking for excuses to not do the thing. And that's a totally different thing than if they come, looking for a solution for every excuse versus an excuse for every solution. So part of it is just the mindset the person is in.
Absolutely.
So I think it would depend on the person. But I think for the most part, what I would say is you have to look at it as a long-term thing with shorter bouts within that long-term, right? And if you're lucky enough to be alive, then health is the problem of privilege that you are left with. And you only get one body, and this is one precious life, right? So what are you going to do with it?
How much, I want to ask you a couple more questions before I let you go. How much emphasis do you put on mindset over the other things, right? The other physical things, like the actual, going to the gym, walking on the treadmill, or going outside for a walk versus eating broccoli and all of those types of things like that. Does it have a certain level of importance in the way that you would teach and coach and train or and show people?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the thing about it is that you can't make yourself do any of the other things. You can't make yourself go for a walk, do lunges, or do a bench press if you don't have the right mindset. So again, it depends a little bit on the person in front of me, how much I emphasize each. So I think of there's sort of 3 pillars of health. There's the sort of mindset aspect, there's the fitness, and then there's sort of nutrition. And that, I mean, there's obviously sleep as well, but basically if you think about health as like a table on top of these 3 legs, and everyone's a little bit different. So some people will come in and they really have the mindset and the fitness dialed down, but they eat like crap. So then with that person, I might try to work more on the nutrition. And then some people will come in and they know all of the best knowledge about all the newest workouts and the newest diets, but they can't actually make themselves do it. So for them, I'd be like, okay, you know enough, you got enough knowledge, but knowledge is moot. If you can't make yourself do it, who cares, right? Like what's that? There's a Derek Sivers quote that's like oh, if knowledge was enough, we'd all be billionaires with six-pack abs. I think
Oh
it's
yeah.
something like that, right? So, so I think it depends a little bit on the person, but for the most part, I believe that all three things are important: mindset, fitness, and nutrition.
Yeah.
And you got to have a balance, but you have to have a healthy enough mindset to make yourself do the fitness and nutrition. And here's the thing, and I know this from listening to your podcast, that you would agree with me that like if you don't have the right mindset, then what you're going to choose for the fitness and the nutrition is not going to serve you. As in, like, if your mindset is like, oh my God, if I'm not size 2, I'm not worthwhile, then you're going to starve yourself and you're going to overexercise. So mindset really dictates how you use the fitness and the nutrition information that's out there. And that's why mindset is unbelievably important, right? Because health is like, there's a lot of actions that are healthy in moderation, but overexercising, not healthy, right? Over dieting, not healthy. And we were talking before we started recording of this idea of the golden mean. That's like an Aristotle concept. And that's this idea of like, with every virtue, there's vices on either side. And the golden mean is the sort of middle, right? And I think that that's so true with exercise and health. Is like, yes, going for a walk is really healthy. Walking for 24 hours a day, not so healthy, right? Like sleep is really important. Sleep for 24 hours a day, not so good, right? Like, so everything is, it is that golden mean. I don't know, that's a long answer to
the point of diminishing return, right? I agree 100%. I think that those are both valuable. This has been awesome. I love chatting with you.
You're so great. I love it.
We could talk for hours. What's something you just like to leave the audience with? Like, if you have one tip, one strategy, one idea, one thought, something that you wish somebody would have told you, like, what would that be?
Something is always better than nothing. I really got into, when I was younger and I couldn't make myself exercise and I hated exercise, it was really because I thought in order for the workout to be beneficial, I needed to run for an hour, or I needed to do weights for an hour, or like it had to be this like massive endeavor. And I'm not arguing that running for an hour is bad. Like, I've run like 8 marathons and an Ironman and stuff. So like, now the current version of Kathleen can go out for, an hour-long run, but Kathleen at 15 absolutely couldn't. And I paralyzed myself by thinking that I had to be perfect. So start where you are. 10-minute walk, 15-minute walk, 10 squats, whatever that is. And even if you're somebody who normally goes to the gym for an hour, if something comes up at work and you can't, go home and do 20 minutes of calisthenics, like at home in your living room, right? Like, something is always better than nothing.
I love that. I'm going to put all of your details, all of your info, your website, your social media, all that will be all in the show notes, so people will be able to find you super easy. Is there one place that you like to hang out? Like, if it would be the best place to see, like, what's Kathleen doing today?
I mean, my website is KathleenTrotter.com, and Fit by Kathleen T on Instagram, I guess, or Facebook. I don't know. I really get hold of me. I love hearing from people. So, you can message me through my website or on Instagram or Facebook, and I will definitely.
Awesome. And I'll put all those in the show notes and everything. So it'll be super easy to find. And then once the show comes out, we'll tag you on all the social media platforms.
Amazing. Yeah. Perfect. I think that's great.
Thanks for sharing with me today.
Oh, you're fantastic. And I loved listening to your story, and I really enjoyed. Yeah, you're very inspirational. Even honestly, I think that's something, a nice takeaway to finish with is, I was listening to you yesterday and I was thinking about not doing my workout. And then I was like, nope, I got to do my workout.
So, that's super cool.
But even fitness professionals, that's that ripple effect.
Yeah, I agree.
We all need a helping hand sometimes.
Agreed. Thank you so much. Pleasure to meet you. Hey, before you go, I'd just like to say thank you again for listening to the Thrive Forever Fit podcast and watching on YouTube. It means the absolute world to me. And if you would do me one favor, and that is simply subscribe and review this podcast on whatever platform it is that you enjoy it on, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, doesn't matter. I would absolutely be so grateful and so thankful if you do that for me. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you again next week with an awesome episode. Bye.